Good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for September the 27th. Today we are reading together from Psalm 118. The 118th Psalm is the final Psalm in this run of Psalms known as the Egyptian Hallel Psalms. These Psalms were sung in and around the Passover in connection with the celebration of God's rescuing of the people during the time of the Exodus. And as we've been reading through these Psalms, we've made some connections to the Exodus, and hopefully that has enlightened us on their usage in that capacity, but also hopefully has given us some things to think about for us as we consider the goodness of God and his deliverance of us from our sin. And today's Psalm in Psalm 118 has a ton of messianic undertones. As we're going to look at today, the messianic nature I don't think is we'll say original to the text. In the context itself, they don't pop off the page, but as Jesus uses them in his own speaking, as Peter and Paul and others use this psalm as well, we understand the bigger picture of the application of this psalm and the messianic elements that are certainly present within it. So let me go and get the text up on the screen, and let's read it together here. Psalm 118. Again, looking at the psalm, the last of the Egyptian Hallel Psalms, this psalm is focused on thanksgiving in the context of a victory in battle. It seems that there was some sort of militaristic victory, and in doing so, those who were involved come back to the Lord and offer him praise, because the reality is that victory should lead to praise. Victory should lead to praise, and we certainly are going to see that here in Psalm 118. So let's begin reading in verse number 1. Psalm 118, verse number 1, give thanks to Yahweh, for he is good. His faithful love endures forever. Let Israel say, his faithful love endures forever. Let the house of Aaron say, his faithful love endures forever. Let those who fear Yahweh say, his faithful love endures forever. I called to Yahweh in distress, and Yahweh answered me and put me in a spacious place. Yahweh is for me. I will not be afraid. What can a mere mortal do to me? Yahweh is my helper. Therefore, I will look in triumph on those who hate me. It is better to take refuge in Yahweh than to trust in humanity. It is better to take refuge in Yahweh than to trust in nobles. All the nations surrounded me. In the name of Yahweh, I destroyed them. They surrounded me. Yes, they surrounded me. And in the name of Yahweh, I destroyed them. They surrounded me like bees. They were extinguished like a fire among thorns. In the name of Yahweh, I destroyed them. They pushed me hard to make me fall, but Yahweh helped me. Yahweh is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. There are shouts of joy and victory in the tents of the righteous. The Yahweh's right hand performs valiantly. Yahweh's right hand is raised. Yahweh's right hand performs valiantly. I will not die, but I will live and proclaim what Yahweh has done. Yahweh disciplined me severely, but did not give me over to death. Open the gates of righteousness for me. I will enter in through them and give thanks to Yahweh. This is Yahweh's gate. The righteous will enter through it. I will give thanks to you because you have answered me and have become my salvation. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This came from Yahweh. It is wondrous in our sight. This is the day Yahweh has made. Let's rejoice and be glad in it. Yahweh, save us. Yahweh, please grant us success. He who comes in the name of Yahweh is blessed. From the house of Yahweh we bless you. Yahweh is God and has given us light. Bind the festival sacrifice with cords to the altar, or to the horns of the altar. You are my God, and I will give you thanks. You are my God. I will exalt you. Give thanks to Yahweh, for he is good. His faithful love endures forever. Psalm 118. Again, a celebration of victory that has been given to the author of this psalm and those who were participating with him in that victory by God. The emphasis here again is that salvation has come from Yahweh, and based upon that salvation, praise is due him. We have an inclusio within the psalm. Hopefully, you picked up on that in verses 1 and 29, which read the same about giving thanks to Yahweh, for he is good, his faithful love endures forever. These first four verses really focus on that faithful love of God. Again, we've talked about this so many times about this term hesed, which means faithful love, loyal love. It is based upon covenant loyalty. Those who are within this psalm, those who are described as Israel, as the house of David, as those who fear Yahweh, they are people who are in covenant with Yahweh. And as they trust in Yahweh in this time of battle, in this time of struggles, we're going to see here in a moment, as they trust in him, he is faithful to them, and he blesses them with great victory in the midst of this battle. Therefore, they are to give thanks to him, for he is good, and his faithful love endures. His faithful love endures forever. Well, then we see a connection here from verses 1 through 4, specifically verse 4, into the next section, verses 5, 6, and 7. In verse number 5, we see that the language here is of a single person. Again, the author, possibly the king, possibly a priest is in view here, but quite possibly a king. That he cries out to Yahweh in his distress, and Yahweh answers him. He puts him in a spacious place. He says that the Lord is for me. I will not be afraid. What can a mere mortal do to me? Yahweh is my helper. Therefore, I will look in triumph on those who hate me. And let's notice the contrast here between fear. Whenever one fears Yahweh, it leads to not being fearful, which is kind of a weird thing, right? How can being fearful lead to not being fearful? Well, it's all about who we are afraid of. When we are afraid or fearful of Yahweh, when we have a great respect of Yahweh, when we are in awe of Yahweh, then we have no reason to truly be scared of men, to be fearful of men. What can a mere mortal do to me when I am one of those, verse 4, who has a fear of Yahweh? So there's a contrast here between fearing Yahweh and fearing men. When we fear Yahweh, we have no reason to fear men, for Yahweh is the helper of the righteous. Which is why, verse number 8, we see wisdom, verses 8 and 9. This probably reminds us a little bit of a proverb of sorts, really. How it is better to take refuge in Yahweh than to trust in humanity or to trust in nobles. That idea of taking refuge in Yahweh is the idea of trusting in Yahweh. So it's better to trust in Yahweh than in, taking language from the previous section, than a mere mortal. Why? Because mortals are limited. Mortals are weak. But God, again, is the helper of the faithful, a helper of the righteous, a helper of those who fear in him. So yes, it is better to trust and take refuge in Yahweh than to try to trust and take refuge in other people. So here comes the conflict of verse number 10, that the nations surrounded me. Then I'm just going to kind of stick with the themes in these verses. So I'm going to go a little out of order here. I'm not going to look at everything in each verse. Let's notice first the issue in verse 10. They surrounded me. Verse 11, yes, they surrounded me. Verse 12, they surrounded me like bees. They pushed hard to make me fall. Verse 13. So here's the struggle. Here's the difficulty. It is a situation where it looks like the prospect of victory is we'll just say dire. It didn't look like things were going to go well. They're surrounding me. They're surrounding me like bees. They're trying to make me fall. But he says, the author says, I destroyed them. Verse number 10. I destroyed them. Verse number 11. They were extinguished like a fire among thorns. I destroyed them. Verse number 12. But how? How was he able to do so? I want to begin in verse number 13 and look at verses 13 and 14. But Yahweh helped me. And verse 14, Yahweh is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. Now let's tie that together with what we see 3 times in verses 10, 11, and 12. In the name of Yahweh. In the name of Yahweh, the author was able to destroy them. In the name of Yahweh, he was able to overcome them. In the name of Yahweh, he was able to extinguish them like a fire among thorns. Why? because he is the author's strength. He is the one who gives salvation. So, what is accomplished here in the midst of this difficulty is accomplished very clearly identified by the author as something that God allowed to happen, something that God empowered the author to do. Yes, the author might have destroyed them. Again, if the king's inside here, yes, the king might have destroyed them, but the king didn't do it on his own. No, the king did so by the power of Yahweh, by the power of his God. Yahweh helped me. An echo from verse number 7, where Yahweh is my helper. Yahweh helped me. He is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. So there's victory now. There are shouts of joy and victory, verse 15, in the tents of the righteous. And here we have Yahweh's right hand being identified as that which is raised, as that which is valiant, as that which gives victory. The author here, I will not die, but I will live, and I'm going to proclaim what Yahweh has done. Again, Yahweh's getting the credit here. Yes, the king recognizes that he participated and that he did some things too, but at the end of the day, the victory that was given was by God's hands. Verse 18, the Lord disciplined me severely, but did not give me over to death. Maybe, again, things were looking bleak. Maybe this was a battle that was being fought because as a punishment for sin. So maybe God was punishing them in some way. But at the end of the day, because they put their faith in God, because they feared him once again, because they maybe repented and came before him humbly, he gave them the victory. So verses 5 through 18, there is the struggle, there is the battle, there is the response of those involved, and at the end of the day, they trusted in Yahweh, and Yahweh gave them the victory. So what does that lead to then? Well, that leads to the return from battle and this wonderful procession of victory, of praise and honor toward God. Open the gates of righteousness for me, and I will enter through them and give thanks to Yahweh. So they're coming back into the city. They're coming back through the gates. And what are they doing? They're not saying, oh, look how good we were. Look at how much we accomplished. No. It is giving thanks to God. This is Yahweh's gate, and the righteous will go through it. And what will the author do? What will the king do here? I will give thanks to you, because you have answered me and have become my salvation. Now, let's keep this in context. I know as soon as I read verses 22 and 23, we want to apply it immediately to Jesus, but let's keep it in context here, because the principle behind this verse here in this psalm is what gives Jesus's usage of this psalm the power. So here's the issue in context. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The stone that the builders rejected. The stone, it seems here to be the people of God. And the builders seem to be the enemies. That the enemies rejected God's people. The enemies sought to harm God's people, sought to throw God's people to the wayside, to show them as useless and weak. But that very stone has become the cornerstone. Why? Well, because God said so. This came from Yahweh, and it is wondrous in our sight. So that which someone else rejected, God is going to use in a powerful way. They rejected them in this battle, it seems, but God is using them to give victory and to be victorious. So this is the day Yahweh has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. This is a day of rejoicing and victory based upon God's strength in this battle, exemplified through giving victory. So, I love this verse as much as anybody else, verse 24, and it's I think it's a wonderful thing to maybe have as something in your home, as a picture or something to remind you each day that every day comes from the Lord, and that's true, it does. But in context, this is specifically about God giving victory to those who had previously been rejected. So in context here, it is a day of rejoicing and victory. Why? Because others threw the stone away, but God has picked it up, has put it in a very important place, and has given it the victory. So in a minute, we'll come back and think about how Jesus uses this psalm. But then it concludes in verses 25 through 29. Yahweh save us. Yahweh, please give us victory. As one writer said, please maintain your saving presence among us. Stay with us. Don't leave us. And in fact, he who comes in the name of Yahweh is blessed. From the house of Yahweh, we bless you. Yahweh is God and has given us light. Bind the festival sacrifice with cords to the horns of the altar. I'm not going to get into all the translation issues going on in this verse. But what we're seeing here with what is said in verse 27, what is said in verse 28, that you are my God and I will give you thanks. You are my God. I will exalt you. All of this, again, gets back to one of the main points of the psalm, I believe, in that victory must lead to praise. Whenever God gives us the victory, whenever God gives his people the victory, they should return that to God in praise, not take the credit themselves, not become haughty or arrogant within their own hearts, but recognize who gave that victory. Again, the author here clearly says, I was surrounded. I was in distress. I was in a bad place. They surrounded me like bees. But who came to the rescue? In the name of Yahweh, I overcame. Yahweh is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. So give thanks. Verse 29, give thanks to Yahweh, for he is good. His faithful love endures forever. Again, that inclusio there of verses 1 and 29 shows us that everything in between is a sign of God's goodness. It is a sign of God's enduring faithful love, and it is a reminder to us that we should give thanks to him for the victory. He is the one that makes it happen. So you think about this in the context of the Passover and the Exodus. Who made the Exodus happen? Who was the one who empowered Israel to walk out of Egypt? Who empowered Israel to cross the Red Sea on dry ground? Who allowed Israel to approach him at Mount Sinai? Who brought him across the Jordan, again on dry ground, and gave them the promised land? Who did that? Yahweh did. Yahweh was their strength. Yahweh was their song. Yahweh became their salvation. So a very powerful psalm here to conclude these Egyptian Hallel songs. Again, this very well and quite probably was a psalm that Jesus himself sang. So it makes sense then that he would be familiar with it and he would know how to apply this psalm to himself. Because we know by Jesus' own words and by those of his inspired writers after him who wrote texts in the New Testament, that ultimately it's Jesus who is the stone that the builders rejected. He said that to his enemies, that he was the stone that they were rejecting, and yet he would become the chief cornerstone. And this was something that Yahweh did, his Father did. This is something that God the Father did, and is wondrous in his sight. The words of verses 25 and 26 were sung in the triumphal entry in the Gospels. People understood what was going on. They understood that the king had arrived and victory was at hand. And what have we said? Victory must lead to praise. So for us, as we consider our own lives and we consider the various victories that Yahweh has given us, may we be like those who worshiped according to the psalm. May we also give praise to him. May we recognize that we need to give thanks to Yahweh, for he is good and his faithful love endures forever. If you have any questions or comments about Psalm 118, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And I appreciate you taking some time to read along with me today on this Friday, a wet Friday, of course, as the weather is moving from the coast up, and we're going to get plenty of that rain, I think, from the hurricane. So please continue to be prayerful for all those affected by it. Pray for Jeff Harwell and his family and the Christians down in that area. Pray for Zach as he is away. I think Caden may or may not have made his way down there as well. So pray for those who are working to restore power to those affected by the storms, and continue to pray for the situation as a whole. Looking forward to seeing everybody on Sunday for our Bible studies beginning at 10 and our worship assembly at 11. It's a fifth Sunday, so we're going to continue working our way through the Gospel of Mark, getting into Mark chapter 14 on Sunday in our worship assembly as we continue to march our way through toward the end of Mark's Gospel. We're going to see the ante being upped by Jesus' enemies. We're going to look at Wednesday, where there is a day of appraisal that takes place. I'm not quite sure how far we're going to go yet. I need to sit down and kind of map out how many more third and fifth Sundays we have to make sure I fit it all in as best we can. But we're looking forward to continuing our study in Mark on Sunday. Again, thanks so much for tuning in today. Looking forward to seeing everybody on Sunday. Looking forward to being back reading together with everybody on Monday. We'll be in Psalm 119, which is the very long psalm, the acrostic, which is a celebration of God's law. I think we're going to handle 2 sections at a time. So we're going to read about 16 verses each of our reads moving forward as we get through Psalm 119 together, and hopefully be a blessing to us as we do celebrate together God's incredible law, his teaching, and his instruction. Again, thanks for tuning in today. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday. We'll read together again on Monday. Take care and God bless.